Believe it or not, you did not. Yeah, you're good to go.
If that pillow's bothering you, why don't you just put it over?
That's fine.
Are you going to tolerate this?
What are you going to do?
Talk about threshing machine and wheat farming.
I will either go to sleep or read the paper. Just don't talk loud, okay? I've been talking like this, sort of modulated like this.
Okay.
Letting you sleep. Where's that glare coming from? It's not quite hitting your eyes. Where's it coming from?
I have no idea. Stacy, hello.
Oh, what?
We're finally around to explain to you why I went for so many years to the Dufur threshing bee celebration every year, and how it reminded me so much of what we used to go through every time the threshing machine would come through to our farm to go through the same procedure. I have gone to that annual Dufur threshing machine bee every year for just years and years, because it was exactly what we used to go through on the farm every year when the threshing machine, or what we called the separator, would come through to take care of our grain. It was the most exciting part of the day for little kids on the farm when this happened. And I've gone to that threshing bee at Dufur for so many years, they can't show me anything new anymore that I haven't seen repeatedly. There has been a great celebration that they've held every year in Dufur, because that's exactly what they did there in the early days before the combine period came to the west. We so enjoyed this on the farm as little kids because it was something way different and exciting. We had quite a bit of wheat land on our bottom land, and in the very beginning, when I was really young, I remember my daddy would have to combine it, and we had a binder, so we took care of that ourselves. And then my first job was to go through and pick up those bundles that the binder put together and tied, and set them up in the stubble so the heads were up and pointed right toward the sun, so it'd make them good and dry and hard, because they didn't thresh this wheat until it was as hard as it can get, to what keeps it in storage in good shape. And as I say, going through and picking up those 5 to 6 bundles and leaning them all together so they're drying out to the utmost that way. And then my daddy would have to go through with a helper and a wagon, and they'd throw up these bundles onto the wagon, and he'd make a load out of it so that the load was probably on the wagon about 10 feet high and covered clear to the outside edge and the full length. It was a good load of grain. And they would have to haul it up and pick a place and put it in big haystacks, probably 15 feet diameter in the base, straight up for quite a ways, and then rounded out at the top with all the bundle heads pointed out. And we usually end up with about 3 of these big piles, and that's so the threshing machine, when it showed up, could get right between them and throw all 3 piles onto the conveyor from one location to get the grain threshed out, so it didn't have to move.
So let's go back a minute. What does the binder do?
The binder cuts the grain and come and makes it into bundles about 6-7 inches diameter, all upright and tied with binder twine twice around the middle to hold them in little bundles. And we would dump those bundles at about 6 to a pile as we could count them out, and then that's what we had to take and put in the shops.
So did you run the binder? I think you said you run the binder.
My dad would pull the binder in the beginning with a team of horses, but eventually with a new Fordson tractor that we bought. And I remember that tractor being delivered. I came home from school and they had unloaded into the barn, and I walked around looking at every inch of that tractor. I was really proud of that Fordson tractor when we first got it.
How many horses did it used to use before you got the tractor?
The binder could be pulled by 2 horses.
2 horses.
And when we got that to plow with a team of horses, we could only pull 1 plow. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time to plow 1 field, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
But with the tractor, we could pull two plows at one time.
Sure.
So it was just twice as fast.
Sure.
And
so just the binder again. So the binder is a thing that ties and wraps. It cuts and ties and bundles the wheat. Right?
Yeah.
Does it also do oats?
In any grain.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
except the corn. Now we didn't use it on the corn.
Sure.
They do have equipment for corn, but we only had 6 acres, so we just did that by hand.
So on the binder, what made it run? The horses pulled it? Did the wheels have some gears on it or something?
One big wheel under the mechanism powered all the machinery of the binder.
Okay.
A metal wheel, quite large diameter and quite wide, with cleats on it, so it would have to turn when you pulled it.
Grip it down.
Mm-hmm.
You used to run it, right?
I used to sit, when I got a little older, have to sit on the binder and run it, yeah. And my dad would pull it with a Fordson tractor. And he wanted 6 bundles, all bound and tied, dumped in a pile. And when I first started running that, I was so small that I had to really hold that foot lever down with my right leg and brace myself on equipment I could hold on to up there on the seat to hold that last bundle till it dropped, because it was so heavy on the foot pedal. Finally, when that number 6 would pop out and I could see it back there, I would just let go of that foot pedal and it would automatically just dump it right there at that time.
So you had to push on the pedal to keep the bundles on a tray or something like that?
On this rack, yeah, until we had 6 bundles on it.
Did they come out the back or the
They
side?
came out the end of it.
And the back end?
Yeah. And as I say, this binder mechanism was powered by quite a large, probably 5 foot.
Oh, that big.
Metal wheel that was at least 8-9 inches diameter, or across the top, diameter, and with dirt cleats on it, so it would turn as we pulled it.
And the only job of the person running the binder was to hold on, to hold on to that pedal. You didn't have to do anything with the cutting.
Oh, we had to watch the cutter to be sure we had about the right elevation, and be sure that we were keeping the binder in line so you were getting a full cut.
So you steered it as well.
It had a little steering mechanism.
Steering mechanism, and then also, how did you adjust the height for the cut?
We had steel lever instruments. Would raise or lower the height.
And you did that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you didn't just push down and hold on this pedal.
No.
That was just the hardest part.
Right. Now, the reason I kept going to the Dufur threshing bee is because they were actually duplicating everything that we used to do on the farm. and it was really a thrilling time for little kids. The threshing machine would come through the area, and he would go to many places and just start at the end of one valley and go from one farm to the next, pulled it with a Fordson tractor, and then there was a power wheel on the Fordson tractor that powered the binder. And
the binder?
Or the threshing machine. And they had a big long belt. Had to be almost, I would think 75 feet long, and a wide belt, at least 9-10 inches wide and heavy, that ran from the power wheel on the Fordson tractor, which he'd dig a hole for the wheels and block it, and run clear up to the threshing machine to power it. And so we start in, and in the beginning I said my dad would have the grain in 3 big grain stacks that was set so he could put the thresh machine in, so he could throw all 3 of the big pile into that conveyor that fed him into the threshing machine. And a man would stand on the top of these piles and throw a bucket of bundles in one at a time. And an interesting side note, Grandma Selleck, who I'm sure you remember, her first husband, back in the Midwest, Omaha area, where they lived then, his job was to feed one of these conveyors to a thresh machine. And they did it by hand, just picking the bundles up and throwing them by hand. But he wore long gloves that went from his hands clear up to his shoulder to protect his arms from getting raw. And he'd pick them up, 2 bundles, one in each hand, throw them in the conveyor. They would travel to the first 4 axle of a bunch of slicing wheels. They would start cutting up these bundles. And he got a glove caught in that conveyor, and he couldn't get it out, couldn't get it loose. They were all trying to get him out, but they kept moving up the conveyor and into those slicing machines and cut him into pieces with the end of her first husband. And she had children by that husband, one of which was Uncle Louie. I don't know whether you remember him or not, but he finally came out west and stayed with Grandma as a middle-aged man until he was an old man. So I think that's where Grandma originally got a bunch of her own money. It was over the loss of that husband in this operation. Because when they got to Sutherland, she bought that property where they lived all the time. My mother was quartered by my father, and where I grew up, and we used to go visit her. And Grandma bought that property herself because she was sick and tired of her husband at that time buying land, staying on it long enough to make a profit, and then selling it and moving to another land. And she was totally tired of moving all the time, and had bought that land with all that property that Uncle Claude went ahead and built houses on, paid her for lot prices, and sold the houses. Now, the reason this was such an exciting period for little kids was because watching the thresh machine work, watching where the grain come down the pipe into the sack filler, feeling the hard, clean grain, and then riding with the wagon that took it up to the granary where the sacks were dumped in the granary. And as soon as the granary got to about half full, we just totally enjoyed going in and playing in the loose, dry grain like it was sand.
So what jobs did you do on the threshing machine? Did you do any of it?
I never did anything on the threshing machine. When I got older, they had gone into combines.
Okay. So All right. So who got the grain out of the threshing machine when it came out?
That's what my dad did. He would fill these sacks, and fill the sacks on this wagon, and then someone would take them up and dump them in the granary.
How heavy were the sacks?
Oh, heavy. That wheat especially was awful heavy. About 3/4 full, I think the sacks weighed at least 125 pounds.
Oh, that's pretty good. Are they burlap or?
Burlap, yeah, they were burlap.
Mm.
And the granaries, we had about 4 of them in our barn. They were about 5 feet wide, probably 10 feet long, and 8 feet ceiling. And then in the front doorway, there were grooves, and you could put boards in for the beginning of the door opening. So as the grain raised, we put boards in that would block the grain from coming out the front entry area. And we'd end up with those granaries about halfway up the wall, 4 to 5 feet full. And it was more fun for us kids to get in there and play in the dry grain after it was all over with, like sand.
You said there were 4 granaries, and you said there's corn, oats, and wheat.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other one? Or was wheat and 2, or corn and 2?
Sometimes we would mix stuff to the way we wanted to use it to feed it or grind it, and use that granary to keep that material.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, when the combine finally showed up, what a great time saver we thought that was. Really great to have it and see it work.
I hear a frog outside.
Yeah. Now,
The guy behind us has a pond, and that's one that's escaped and come to our house.
we used to have at least 2 big fields of wheat, and then 1 of oats. And all this equipment could still handle any normal grain. It couldn't handle corn, but we only had 6 acres, so we just picked it by hand and ran the cobs one at a time through a grinder machine, hand crank, that would shake the corn off the cobs and spit one out a different area and another out another area. That was my job, going through all of that corn, grinding it and feeding the cob in, and removing the corn from the ears.
How long of a job was it to do all of the 6 acres, to pick it and then to grind it off?
Well, they could get it picked pretty easy in a day, just horse dragging the wagon down between rows, and someone on each side taking probably 2 to 3 rows on each side and removing the ears from the husk and filling it up in the wagon. And then we'd fill the ears up on one shelf, big shelf of the barn, where it laid until yours truly could go in there with a hand grinder and start working on this job of getting that all ground off. Yeah. And those cobs made real good wood for the fire stove.
Oh.
They would be dry and they'd get real hot fast. So my mother was always glad to see those cobs show up. She could use them if she wanted to do something fast on cooking. Now, the first thing I remember is having to plow those fields where we planted the corn, the wheat, with a team of horses. And they would only pull 1 hand plow that you walk behind. And as you can imagine, that'd take a long time to plow a big field.
Single blade.
Single blades. We call it a 14-inch plow, which meant it would cover 14 inches across the surface for each trip. When we finally got the tractor, we had bought a riding plow that carried 2 plow blades. So that went just twice as fast, as you can see.
Did you drive the tractor ever with the plows?
No, my dad drove the tractor, and I used to have to sit on the plow running in.
Gotcha. What does it take to run a plow?
Effort, just to be sure you're keeping one wheel in the furrow you just had just gone through.
So
that would put it the right distance to pick the next two.
So you actually steer the plow as well as not steered by the tractor pulling it?
Just a little bit.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now, as you can see, you got a field plowed a lot faster after we finally got the tractor in a two-way plow. But we didn't have in those times a set of plows that would just turn over and you had two plows running one way direction, and on the top you had two other plows running the other direction. Because with those you could just start at the beginning of a field and turn it over every time you wanted to go back, because you could just keep plowing in the same area of the field, just moving across the field, plowing as you went. Didn't have to start one furrow and plow and then go away through the field to start another one pointing in a different direction. So this made it a lot easier, a lot better. Then after plowing, a field had to be disked, and usually we would pull a drag behind it that would crumble up even more and level it.
That's called ditched?
It's not called ditch, it's a furrow. Furrow is what it's called.
Furrow?
Furrow, yeah. And
so plows don't furrow as they go. I thought they furrowed as they go, but they don't?
They do, yeah. But then you have to, when you disc, that levels it out and fill the holes with the furrow. Because you got a bunch of these holes from sections being plowed a different way. And with the flip-flop plows, and then you could just start on one edge and keep going. You turn the plow over to get one going in the right direction, so you could just move the surface over as you went.
Yeah, you were saying that. Yeah.
Then after with the plowed, it had
Looks
to
like
be
he's putting himself to sleep.
had to be gone over with a disc, and usually we pull either a drag or rakes, harrows behind that, about 2 wide, 10 feet.
The discs help break up the earth more?
Right.
Okay.
And
then the rake flattens it out.
As well as little spikes in it that also crumbled it some more.
Yeah.
And then the drag leveled it and made it new. Then we went over with the planter. That dug a little hole, planted the proper amount of grain in each little hole and covered it up.
How many rows could the planter do at once?
I think probably 15 to 25. It was a wide planter with a little hopper at the top that fed grain to each little tube down.
Yeah. Okay, so you were talking about.
Now,
what are you going to go on to?
I kept going to that Dufur threshing machine just to see this action all repeated over and over and over, and I finally decided this year there's no reason to go anymore. They can't show me anything new that I haven't already seen. But as you can see, what an exciting thing it would be for a little kid to have this happen. In those days, the housewife always fed the crew that came that worked on the farm, and the neighbor ladies would help the wife that had the thresh machine there that day, so they would rotate right along to help each other and feed these men on the threshing crew. They usually was about 5, 6 men by the time they counted the people that ran the wagons and the horses to bring the grain in.
Where did they sleep?
They didn't stay night.
Oh. Where did they go?
Home.
They were neighbors and whatnot.
Yeah.
Oh, I
so
thought they were far away.
they quit. all the people quit making haystacks of the grain to be run through the thresh machine. They got so they started joining together and get neighbors on both sides, so they'd have 3-4 wagons at least that would go out and load the grain from the shocks and haul it right to the threshing machine then.
Okay, so they actually changed from having the threshing machine go place to place to having the threshing machine staying still and dragging it to the threshing machine.
Right. And the threshing machine was always pulled by an old Fordson tractor.
But then it was staying still after a while, right?
And then they would, to get to place to place.
Okay.
And then after it was on the plate, they would hold for the wheels, they hold it in place, and then back the old Fordson tractor out at least 50 feet, probably more like 75. And it powered the threshing machine by a big long belt, heavy, had to be 75 feet away. And it was dug into the ground and blocked. And
you ever ride on the belt?
No. This long belt then ran from the power wheel on the threshing machine on the tractor to the power wheel on the threshing machine. And they start up and go like mad all day, and the grain would end up coming down a pipe to a sacking place where you could have two sacks. One could be filled while the other was being filled and the other being changed. And they just tied a binder twine around the sack 3/4 full and throw it up on the wagon. As soon as they had a wagon load, some man would take them up to the granary and empty them, dumping them in, and bring the empty sacks and the wagon back to continue.
Were the sacks owned by the farm or the sacks?
By the farm, yeah.
All right, so they didn't go from place to place.
No, we always had a whole bunch of gunny sacks on the farm my whole life. They ran out of gunny sacks to do their thing at the Dufur threshing machine and found out there weren't any to buy anymore, and they had to have some special made, and it cost about $20 a sack.
That's because they're made of hemp.
So they took pretty good care of those sacks after that.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. Now the better use for that hemp.
No, they made it illegal in the United States to grow it.
Oh, is that right?
Yep. You can't grow hemp here.
Oh.
And the reason they can't grow hemp is because what is made out of it?
Yeah,
oh, no, nothing. No, it was because it's a political thing. It's related to marijuana.
Marijuana, that's it.
But marijuana and hemp are different.
Yeah.
But it's related, and so, I don't know.
Didn't make any difference to them.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, well, does that cover everything you think you were going to talk about, I think?
I think so.
Thrice
that
over?
took longer than the whole harvest usually did.